completely, but let's accommodate that juror's travel by stopping at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, is there any way, I know that the court had said originally we were going to do the hearing at 8:30 and then have the jurors here at 9. I do not intend on doing any cross unless the court needs. Is there any way do we need the full hour and a half for the hearing?
I thought you said 9 to 10, Your Honor, but you said 8:30 to 10?
No, originally it was
8:30 to 10. You know, as soon as I get them here is 8:30 and even 9:30, but even then they'd be waiting.
Oh, okay.
Don't you think? I mean, how long do you anticipate this testimony will take, Mr. DeGuerin, tomorrow?
I would think 30 minutes or longer. At least 30 minutes.
At least 30 minutes, possibly longer, but we don't, apparently there won't be cross. We're not going to start until Mr. Durst is dressed tomorrow. That's sometimes a slow process. What's the earliest we could have him dressed tomorrow? Before 9? Pardon? Well, 8:30. Can we do it? 8:30? Okay, so let's say 9:30.
Great, thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah. Okay, let's bring in our jurors. Let's bring in our jurors. Ladies and gentlemen, I see tomorrow I did promise a juror that she could leave earlier. So we'll all break it. We'll break at 4 o'clock tomorrow. But what I've done is mobilize the lawyers to get the other stuff done faster. So we'll start at 9:30. How's that? We start at 9:30. We'll do our best to finish. We'll be 99% finished with this by then. All right, with the people's case. So, thank you all for your cooperation. We're all working as a team here in that way. Mr. Durst is present with his lawyers, the People's Counsel, all are present, and Mr. Henderson, you may resume.
No, if you call me up, yes, you were a little bit of a creative director. So yeah, John is a huge or yes, yeah, they're I mean, I haven't been everybody's having just I took to let's just have somebody so yeah, I have a question. Wait, you go back to the timeline. Okay. Go ahead. I'm almost there. That's all. Sure. Wait a second. I want you to put that hold on a second. Here it is. It's from 1990 to 1992. We're talking about the trip to Susan, right?
No, I wanted to know, when Susan was killed in December of 2000, we wanted to know when were you out there in reference to when she was killed?
Oh, yeah, okay, she's killed in 2000, right?
Yeah.
I was there from 1992.
Wait, say that again, you're going in and out.
Between 1990 and 1992.
Oh, no, so we're talking about 2000. Let's go another way here. Do you know why? We've always wondered, how come Bob sent a letter to the police? Do you know?
No sense at all. Anything he told you, have you said right on that for you? No, it makes no sense at all. I mean, if I cancel or I certainly would care more about timing with nothing than I would about checking after killing a person.
Have you ever asked him?
No. Well, actually, I don't have to. That just happened. That just came with HBO series.
No, but the cadaver letter has been publicly known for many years.
Well, I didn't know it.
Oh, so the first time you ever heard anything about the letter was during the series?
Yeah.
So let me go another way, Nick. So when you...
They've been pleading with me.
What's that? right now, Nick?
I'm not sure, but that phone's not working if you're out there.
Oh, okay.
Interagency, and do you think he feels any remorse about Susan killing her? What kind of remorse he'll make him right down there, right? Well, just now, as he sits here today, based on your recent conversation with him, do you know about Susan? You think, hey, he's just a stone cold killer, he doesn't care? Well, it's not even a stone cold killer. It's like, maybe I'm different wired than you are, but other people I've talked about, they say, well, he must have felt guilty of the batteries lying there and not annoying it. I wouldn't care, maybe because I'm not religious, but I wouldn't care about that. I killed someone. That's the overarching act. I care more about this. But I,
Wait, Nick, I want to go back. You had said before that you didn't really have to, so I'd said, hey, has Bob ever admitted that he killed Kathy? And you said, you know, in essence, you didn't want to answer the question. If the answer was no, wouldn't that be a pretty easy answer? You there?
yeah, it's, I have to tell you, this is a long conversation because Bob and I spent some time together the last few months.
Oh, no, have you meaning before he ended up getting arrested?
Yes.
Okay, and was that in New York? Or were you in Houston?
Yes. Yes.
Did Bob know this was coming? What's that? Did Bob know that all this was coming? Well,
Can you hear me?
yeah, now we
Yeah,
can.
we lost you for a few minutes there. Yeah, we can hear you now. So you met with him, so the meetings you had with him then weren't necessarily while he was in jail. These were meetings before he was arrested. Right.
And I was asking, did Bob know this was coming?
Like this, you mean the Los Angeles thing?
Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't know if he did or not. I don't think so, but I think he was wanting to confess things. Yeah.
Yeah.
What? He just trusts you so much, or? Yeah.
So when you were saying he was wanting to confess things, you don't mean to the movie guys, you mean to you.
Yeah.
So listen, I'm gonna lay it out on the table, Nick. You know, I told you I'm not a bullshitter. I'm gonna be straight with you. It's very clear with what you're saying. It's very clear that you're carrying a big weight right now, and you're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. Am I being a disloyal friend?
That's exactly right. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, am I being a disloyal friend? You know, I can't bring Kathy back, I can't bring Susan back, but I will tell you that what's right is right, and I think you know I don't have to tell you what's right and what's wrong. Bob has said things to you, and I think you know what the right thing to do is right now, and if you can just get yourself over the hurdle, you know, it's almost like ripping a Band-Aid off, Nick. Just...
Okay, well said. Everything you said was just reaches right into it's exactly right.
Well, so listen, Nick, if you weren't a decent person,
You wouldn't be feeling that.
you wouldn't be feeling that. So, you know, listen, it is... I mean, Nick, in the end, we are all responsible in life for the choices that we make. You can't be responsible for what Bob has done, but you can be responsible for covering up for him. And, you know, it's time.
I haven't had to do it.
No, you haven't, because no one has. So I can tell, Nick, it's very funny. You've been kind of waiting for this call from us and trying to figure out what you were gonna say and how you're gonna handle it. Am I right?
You're right, 100%.
Okay, well, sorry. So listen. So here you are. This is kind of the moment of truth. Just let it out, Nick. Tell us what Bob said. Just get it
I'm
out.
gonna sell ripping off the Band-Aid throughout the tank or so. I promise you I'll talk to you.
Okay, hey, listen. Are you giving me
Give you my word.
the last thing I'm gonna say? Will you give me my word? My word that if we call you tomorrow, you'll tell us the whole thing?
No, I'll talk to you and tell you what I've decided, actually.
Okay. All right, hey,
I
listen.
wouldn't be saying that. I mean, I just want to think some more. What are you thinking of? Like, what's your hesitation? Exactly what you guys. My hesitation, well, there's other things involved here. Like what? Well, can I ask you guys to keep this off the record?
It depends what it is. It's very hard to...
It's not about Bob.
Is this about your wife?
Yeah, part of it.
And is this about Debbie and real estate?
No.
Okay.
You know what works?
Well, your wife was working for Debbie.
Oh, yes. Not now. Where does she work now? The Durst organization.
Oh,
Works for the Durst.
Oh, okay.
Public.
Yeah. And so what you're saying is a part of this is you're wondering if what you say is damaging for Bob, what's going to happen to your wife?
Well, she'll be in better shape than her company.
What's that?
She'll be in better shape than her company working for Douglas. My wife is very non-protective of Bob. You know, we argued over this in many times, especially when I was advocating and children. You know what I mean? She's with you guys.
Let me ask you something. Is it worth? How would you feel about us contacting your wife?
Not yet, because it's too awful make because I'm like, we don't do that, and I'll tell you the truth.
Okay, all right. Listen, I'll stick to that. I'll tell you what. Here's Nick.
John, let me finish.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of a really big pitch for one of the biggest jobs in the city to Douglas Durst. Again, Sheriff Douglas is, scared to death of Bob and certainly wants to see Bob put away, and help me, but, no, I mean, I'm sure Douglas wants to shoot just like everyone else.
Yeah, Nick, I want to be clear about it.
Here's what he's talking about.
Well, no, but I want to be clear about this. Is what you're saying, you're not telling us that you would make this up to help your wife or put in...
No.
I mean, it sounds like your big issue right now is it's your loyalty to Bob. Am I right?
That's the only issue, yeah.
Well, all right, well, listen, so let me do this. Here's my concern. My concern is you're going to get off the phone with me and you're going to either call Stuart Altman or you're going to call Bob's lawyers or you're going to get word to Bob and then you're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to talk. Is that going to happen?
No.
Are you giving me
Not a
my...
chance.
Okay.
Will you give us a show of faith by just giving us a 2-second synopsis of what he told you? I'm going to tell you tomorrow. I'll tell you probably.
All right, I will call you at what time? I'll call you tomorrow.
For sure, I'm not calling Stuart Altman.
Okay. Hey, listen. If you're giving me your word, Nick, if you're giving me my word, then listen, if we give you a day to think about it and we leave you alone, we don't call, your wife, etc., we'll call you tomorrow afternoon at, it's 6 o'clock your time. What time do you want us to call you tomorrow?
I'd rather you call a little earlier, like around 4 o'clock, right?
Okay, we'll call you at 1 o'clock. Which number?
727-4701.
Okay,
That's not working. It said, I can't believe the phone's over.
727-4701. All right, yeah.
Then my cell phone will be the next one. But you know the thing about Terry, my wife, because she was so much to talk about. She'll make my life totally miserable. No, we're not going to call her. We're not going to talk to her.
No, we're not. Listen, I told you before, Nick, believe it or not, I understand the position that you're in, and I actually, believe it or not, I respect the fact that knowing everything that's out there, you're still protective of your friend. And it seems to me that what's kind of happened to you, Nick, is that you're kind of caught between the friend that you remember, kind of the person you wish he was, versus the person that he's kind of turned out to be. Is that right?
Yeah, you guys should be psychologists. That's exactly right.
Well, listen, we'll give you till tomorrow. Give me that number one more time. I didn't write it. 7.
212,
Yeah.
727, 701. And you had that number, you said that number to me earlier.
Yes, okay, yeah, I have it on my 727.
727, 4701.
Got
And
it.
I'm just wondering, what you've been holding down deep inside? Have you told anyone else, or are you the only one with knowledge? No. I haven't told anyone. What about your wife? My wife, yes.
Yeah, well, listen, we're gonna, like I said, we'll call you tomorrow, Nick. We appreciate it. Last thing I want you to remember, though, because when you get off the phone, here's my guess. When you get off the phone, the first thing you're going to be saying to yourself is, oh my God, what did I say? What did I tell him that? And have I told him too much, etc.? You've already told us 90% of it. So the Band-Aid's almost all off. So we'll go.
I told you I knew it, and I told you this much, that I couldn't back away.
Hey, Nick, it is very clear to me there are certain people that don't want to give you information. There are other people that you just have to figure out a way to let them give you the information they want to give you. You want to tell us this, it's clear.
Right.
So,
your message was just call me the message that I don't want to talk to anyone.
yeah, so you could have done that.
I didn't do that.
No, you didn't. You didn't. Hey, Nick, we will call you tomorrow. We appreciate this. And listen, like I said, last thing I'll leave you with is, good friend or not, you cannot own whatever it is Bob has done. Bob owns what he's done. You can only own what Nick Chavin does. So, I mean, I know he's your friend and I know you feel badly, but, it's an unfair burden for you to be carrying that, this is what you've done. You haven't done anything. You're simply, and you've been, it looks to me like a pretty good friend to him for a number of years. He's very lucky.
Yeah.
All right, we'll call you tomorrow.
Okay, I'll talk to you guys.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Do you have additional questions?
Yeah, I can see. So you recognize your voice on the phone?
Yeah, all 20 minutes.
You didn't know at the time of that call that there were police officers who were monitoring as well, is that correct?
I think I did. I think you always said that. You'd always sort of said, wait, I gotta get someone else on the phone, and sometimes you got 2 people. At this time in this call, didn't you even say it at the beginning?
If you look, you won't see that I said it.
So, I think I assumed anytime you talk to the authorities, 80 tape recorders are going and all that.
Early on, during that call, you appeared to make several efforts to get off the phone.
Oh, yeah.
Do you recall that?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Well, if I didn't, I heard it now. Because I didn't want it to happen what happened.
You also said that you were going to tell us the next day.
I was stalled.
Did you end up telling us the next day?
No,
Did you rip the Band-Aid off anytime soon?
no, I'm still hanging on.
Did it take until October 30th, nearly 7 months later, for you to actually tell us the full story about what happened at dinner and what Bob said?
Yes, it did. It was a process.
And Nick, you just said it is a process. During the numerous calls that we've had, did I always tell you that it's a process and that my goal is simply that eventually you tell me the entire truth of what you know?
Yes, you did.
Could I phone a friend for some help here? I forgot my question.
Yeah.
I remember.
What was that?
No, friend, lifeline.
Lifeline. That they're, all my support here is ask the reporter. It's not what I was looking for. Can I ask the reporter? I apologize. I just do not remember what
I remember.
Oh, Mr. Chavin, what was my question?
Yes, did you not always say to me, to just tell me the
Yes.
truth?
Now I remember my question. Did I tell you numerous times in our conversations that this was a process and I did not expect that we would get
the entire truth quickly?
Right.
Did I tell you that in the end, my goal was that by the time you got into court, that you would be completely honest, and that when you took the oath, you could do it in good conscience?
Yes.
In any way, in any conversation, did myself or Mr. Bailey or any detectives, did we ever threaten or force you to say anything?
No, just the truth. A little.
Mr. Chavin,
Yes.
had you previously told your wife, let me back up, there was a line in it, the transcript said Charity, your wife's name. Was that a mistake?
Charity, it said. I had no idea what that meant. It was a mistake, obviously.
Should have been Charity, is that right?
Yes.
And did you ever tell your wife, Terry, what Bob Durst had told you that night?
Yes.
And when we asked you to talk to your wife, at that point in time, did your wife already know what you had told her? Had you already told her?
Yes.
What was the reason that you asked us not to speak to your wife?
I was still prepared to back away from what I had said, and I didn't want to get locked into it.
We called you the next day. Do you recall that? Or you called us, one or the other?
Yes.
And do you recall when you picked up the phone, what you said?
Mr. Chavin is in Argentina. Wasn't he? Was that phone call?
And
Yeah.
were you joking when you said that?
No, I was in Argentina. Yeah, I was joking.
And can you tell us what made you say that?
I think a psychologist would say it was wish fulfillment. And I was just joking. I was really just joking, trying to lighten the mood.
And the next day when we called you on April 7th, did you attempt to back away from what you had said?
There were so many calls. I'm pretty sure I did on that call.
At a certain point, and you don't have a specific memory of every call, is that correct?
There were a lot of calls.
At a certain point, did we tell you that we were going to give you some time, let you think about it, and that in the meantime, if we needed to contact your wife, we would call you in advance?
Yes, you did.
Does it sound consistent with the timing? In July of 2015, did we call you back and say, in essence, say, Nick, we got to call your wife, Terry?
I believe so.
And did you tell us, hey, go ahead and call her right now?
I said, let me call her first, I believe.
And what was the purpose in you telling us that?
I wanted to prep her for it so she didn't get hysterical.
And when you prepped her for it, was a part of that preparation to tell her to please not tell us what you had told her about Bob's statement?
Yes, that was my intent.
Eventually, Nick, in October, you, for lack of a better term, came clean with what you had. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask you about Susan Giordano. Do you know who she is?
Oh, yeah.
You know her by different names, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you met her, was she in her early 20s and working for you?
Well, she was working for the whole agency, not just solely for me, but she did work in the service of me, but in the service of other people too.
And back then, were you friends with Bob Durst?
Yes, I was.
And during that period of time, did you know Susan Giordano and Bob Durst to be acquainted?
I knew them not to be acquainted.
And when's the first time that you discovered that Bob and Susan...
Speak to you for 1 minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
You need a second?
Let me stand and stretch, ladies and gentlemen, while I talk to the lawyers. Call it a All right, let's see, where's my microphone? We just had a discussion about when we are watching videos of witnesses in conditional examinations. In some ways, it's better to have the script right crawling under the picture. Then it's very easy to watch the witness at the same time that you're looking at the transcript if you need to. Here, in order to keep your place, you kind of have to look down at the transcript. So it's up to you how you want to go about it. But the transcript is an aid to understanding the witness and the entirety of the communication. The words, but also the presentation are important. So however you choose to go about it, just be mindful of the fact that it's the entirety, not just the words that you should be taking in, although obviously the words are very important, and that's why you have the transcript. So that's all. So let's resume.
You had some kind of relationship.
He told me on a phone call from prison, I guess it was from Galveston, he said, you know that I think he's a crazy woman, but you know that woman that used to work for her? She's been calling me, and we've been talking, and so, you know, maybe we're friendly, I'm gonna go out with her, something like that.
Later on, did you become aware that Mr. Durst and Susan Giordano had some kind of relationship?
Yes.
Have you ever discussed the nature of that relationship with Susan Giordano?
Yes.
And how has she described that relationship?
Well, she described it as, I talk to Bob all the time, we're very close. We share a lot of thoughts, secrets, we're very close. And she, it's very hard to tell with her if she just made something up or several of the things she said to me, Bob later said weren't so.
Has she ever told you that she's in love with Bob?
I don't know if she used the word love, but very fond of.
Has she mentioned to you anything about she and Bob getting a love nest to settle into after?
Yes, she said that she was going to be given $100,000 to buy a love nest for them after Bob got out.
When Bob Durst ended up getting arrested, and I'm talking about in New Orleans,
Right,
in March of 2015,
right.
were you in contact with him between the time you had your dinner, you made the statement, you testified to the time he was arrested? Do you remember if you had any
I
contact?
don't remember what the question is. You're asking.
So, you talked about a dinner that you had,
Oh,
and
yes.
the timeline was late 2014. Bob Durst was arrested March 15th of 2015. Do you remember if you were in contact between those two times?
Between the times of the dinner and the time that Bob was arrested?
Yes.
Where was that relationship to the Jinx?
So if it helps, the Jinx, I want you to assume the Jinx aired, I believe the first hearing was approximately February 6, 2015. I'm going to have you assume this as a hypothetical. Assume that the Jinx aired the beginning of February 2015 and finished on Sunday, March 16th. I want you to assume that for the purposes of my question.
So that's the period between what you're talking about then, right?
Well, so you said we talked about dinner in late 2014.
Right.
So I'm asking, between dinner and the time Bob was arrested on March 15, 2016, March 15, 2015, in that period of time, those few months, do you remember if you had any contact with Bob?
Yes, unless I'm misremembering the time, that's when he wanted me to get back to Drinky about, you know, even though it was late to try to get into the Jinx's character.
Let me ask you, did the...
Right off on the time?
Let me just ask you, when Bob Durst was asking you to talk to Jarecki,
Yes.
was that before or after he gave the statement to you at the restaurant?
And I told you I was bad with dates. restaurant was in December, it was right around Christmas time. Hadn't the Jinx aired before then? Or no, the Jinx aired in March, you said, right?
I want you to assume the Jinx aired beginning of February until the middle of March. Well, I'm not asking when it aired, I'm just asking if...
So yes, we had dinner before that.
Okay. So
I'm
the dinner
sorry
is...
to be difficult, guys.
Okay, it's okay. You said dates are not your best
No,
thing.
they're really not.
So I want to go back to Susan Giordano and Bob Durst. When Bob was arrested, how did you find out that he had been arrested? I'm talking about his New Orleans arrest in 2015.
I think through the media.
At that point, were you still having contact with Susan Giordano?
Yes.
And would Susan Giordano, excuse me, do you need a moment?
Yeah. Thank you. Susan Giordano.
Yeah. Did Susan Giordano ever discuss with you anything about boxes being collected from her house?
Yes, in detail.
What did she tell you?
She told me that approximately 62 boxes had been given to her by Deborah Sheridan to hold for Bob.
Did Miss Giordano mention to you anything about, she mentioned Detective Joe Becerra?
Yes,
What did she say about him?
he was really nice, one of the nicest people she knew. And she talked about so many different authorities that had come to visit her, and she appeared to make herself the epicenter of all these facts that were swirling around the boxes. And then the FBI showed up with papers that were the reason she gave the boxes to them.
Did she mention to you that Bob Durst had sent her somewhere in the area of $350,000 in the last month before he was arrested?
No, but she did say that Bob Durst sent her.
Yes.
She seemed to know. She said to me is that she had sent money to Bob.
Did she tell you specifically that Bob never sent her any money?
Yes. Oftentimes she said that she was asked by the FBI, and I think by you, your office, did you get money from Bob? And she said no. And she said to me, I didn't get anything from Bob. I gave him money. I just thought it was odd. You're saying you gave Bob money? She said yes.
Let me ask you, have you received messages since Bob Durst was arrested from lawyers and investigators who identified themselves as being associated with Mr. Durst?
Have I received letters?
No, have you received messages?
Yes.
And can you tell me what messages you've received?
Well, from Mr. DeGuerin's office.
Who?
Garrett?
Garrett, I'm sorry.
I think you made him Italian. Or a pizza.
Giordano and DeGuerin.
The pizza man.
I don't know Latin, Your Honor, but I
Lewin's pretty easy. From his office, he called on a couple of occasions. A woman named Kat called on many occasions and came to New York.
Let me stop you. Who came to New York?
A woman named Kat that worked for him. You're asking about people from his offices.
Yes, and when you say Kat, would that be someone you know as Kat or Catherine Bain?
I only know the name Kat.
And did you receive actual personal messages from Mr. DeGuerin?
Yes. Not only personal messages, but he appeared at my offices without an appointment, unannounced. And I had people come out and explain to him that I was busy and in meetings and I couldn't meet with him. And he waited, I think, for an hour or so. And I never
Let me stop you.
Yeah.
Interrupt you. Your offices were in New York, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you understand Mr. DeGuerin to have an office in New York?
No.
Did you understand Mr. DeGuerin to be a Texas lawyer?
Yes.
is it your understanding then that Mr. DeGuerin showed up in your New York office without an appointment and personally waited for you for an hour?
I can't say exactly how long, but I think it was about an hour.
And was this before or after the repeated messages from lawyers associated with his firm?
Well, there was a long period of time where 2 or 3 lawyers and at least one private investigator were calling me, my wife, my son Drew, who lives in Brooklyn, and really upsetting me. But it was actually someone from Mr. DeGuerin's office. So at least 2 other lawyers.
And these calls and these messages, did they relate anything that they were requesting of you?
First of all, I have the messages on voicemail, and I also have one, I believe, in email form. Yeah, they were called. They wanted. Well, 2 of them said, "You know, I just happened to be in New York, and I thought maybe we could talk." They made it seem that it just was a serendipity that they happened to be in New York, not that they'd come to New York to talk. The same with the woman named Kat, who I think says his administrative assistant, Kathleen. She called me quite a few times when we came to New York.
And let me ask you, did you ever return those calls?
I may have called the woman you're referring to back. She would say things like, you know, you want to call Dick, he won't bite, we won't bite you. Things like that.
You never called to find out, though. You don't know if he
I
bites.
think I called her back once, I don't know. She said, you know, we have something in common, we have a very good friend in common. I said, oh, who? She said, Kinky Friedman. I mean, she was really trying, she was very nice and just trying to warm up to me to the fact that maybe I'd talked to someone in her office.
How many times, if you could estimate, do you think that you either directly contacted or had messages left for you by either Mr. DeGuerin, lawyers associated with his firm, or an investigator associated?
How many total?
Yeah.
More than 6.
During this period of time, were you also contacted by Kinky Friedman?
Yes,
And
twice.
Kinky Friedman is a close friend of yours as well?
Yes,
And did you become aware that he's also a friend of Mr. DeGuerin?
yes.
And what did Kinky Friedman tell you?
He said, hey, Dick, DeGuerin is trying to reach you, why don't you give him a ring? And I said, well, I don't want to. And he said, well, he's really trying to get a hold of you. He wants to talk to you about the Durst case. And I said, okay. He also called me a week or 2 ago, did the same thing.
Who called you?
Kinky did.
Asking you to call Mr. DeGuerin?
Yes.
During this period of time, was Susan Giordano also calling you and both advising you about the status of Mr. Durst's case and also requesting that you contact Mr. DeGuerin?
Not more than 10 or 15 times. But yes, she was, certainly. Constantly, she said,
Did Susan Giordano ever tell you that Bob's lawyers were aware that you and Bob had seen each other in the year before Bob was arrested?
That would be in the recent times, right?
Yes.
No. She told me that the lawyers were very upset about something I said to someone 16 years ago. And I thought possibly the only I could think of was the interview with Joseph Becerra, when I told him about Susan Berman, and you know, she and I going up and back about Bob. They're very upset when I call them. I mean, she was very, very dramatic with you're killing your best friend by not calling back. You've got to call back.
Do you recall, Mr. Chavin, telling myself and detectives during a conversation on March 3rd, 2016, that in essence, Susan Giordano had told you that Bob's lawyers were aware that you and Bob had seen each other the year before Bob was arrested and that they wanted to know what you and Bob had talked about?
No, that never happened.
Did Susan Giordano ever tell you that Bob's lawyers wanted to know whose side you were on?
Yes.
Did Susan Giordano ever tell you that Bob Durst... Have you ever told Susan Giordano, I'm sorry, what Bob Durst told you after that dinner?
No. Oh, sorry.
Did Susan Giordano tell you that the defense wanted to know what you had told me, John Lewin, and what you intended to tell me?
Yes.
Had you ever told, prior to that time, when Susan Giordano asked you this, had you ever told her that you had spoken to me or mentioned my name?
No. She told me she'd spoken to you.
Did you tell her that you had never spoken to me?
I'm not sure. I think I just avoided dealing with it. And I told her I'd never spoken, sir, I'd never spoken with you. I might have, but I don't think so.
Let me ask you this, did you tell her, oh yes, I've spoken to John?
No.
Mr. Chavin, as you sit here right now, there have been a lot of conversations you've been asked about, is that correct?
Yes.
I want to refer you back to the March 3rd, 2016 interview. It's going to be LADA Bates 151673, page 8, lines 11 through 22.
And that's an exhibit?
Yeah, we'll mark it as an exhibit. I think it's 6, Your Honor.
6.
3/3/16.
6 is a transcript or a report?
I never heard of these names before, you know. I never heard of Chavin, I never heard of Chris Garcia. But Dick DeGuerin, but all these calls at the same time yesterday, which was perfect. We'd ask them, why do they want to talk to me? I don't even know them.
We do have transcripts of these since the stipulation was later, so we weren't able to subtitle things. Would you like me to pass these out?
It is hard to understand that we have a transcript.
Yes, sir. Oh, thank you. Can we replay that?
Can we start that from the beginning, Your Honor?
Yes.
In 2016 interview. It's going to be LADA Bates 151673, page 8, lines 11 through 22.
And that's an exhibit?
Yeah, we'll mark it as an exhibit. I think it's 6, Your Honor.
6.
3/3/16.
6 is a transcript or a report?
I never heard of these names before, you know. I never heard of Chavin, I never heard of Chris Garcia. But Dick DeGuerin, but all these calls at the same time yesterday, which was perfect. We'd ask them, why do they want to talk to me? I don't even know them, you know. And it was what she said, they seem to be obsessed with, we should use the word obsessed. They want to know what you're going to say in court, what you've been saying to Lewin, what, I'm only saying your last name because she did, okay, what you're going to say in court, what you're going to say to Lewin, what do you know about the timeline, and do you know anything about Susan extorting Bob?
Is that your voice, Mr. Chavin?
Yeah.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
And did Susan, in fact, tell you, Susan Giordano, the things that you have stated?
Yes.
So this is 6, is a recording, and 6A is a transcript?
Yes.
Thank you.
In that call, you mentioned that Susan Giordano asked you, do you know anything about Susan extorting Bob? Do you recall that?
Well, I just heard it. Right?
Yeah, so I'm saying, let me go that way. Maybe withdraw the question. prior to Susan Giordano mentioning that, were you aware, had you ever heard any information about Susan Berman extorting Bob Durst?
No, not really.
And when Susan Giordano asked you this, did she ask you if in fact that was true, or did she ask you if in fact you had heard about it?
I don't think she asked me if I'd heard about it, but you're asking me what I remember about a conversation with her. She talks sort of fast and crazily. I
want to play a
wish I
second.
remember. I'm sorry, I don't remember.
I want to play a second clip. This is going to be NC 165-3316, page 6, lines 3 through 8, LADA 151673.
Same exhibit. Thank you.
She nailed a couple of specific things. One was they really want to know some things about the timeline of Bob and Susan, in the past.
Okay.
And then she said they want to know if you knew if Bob was being extorted by Susan.
Yeah.
So return. Good morning, Mr.
Good
Chairman.
morning.
You remain under oath. You may continue with your examination, Mr. Berman.
Thank you, Ron. Mr. Chavin, I want to go back to the night of dinner afterwards when Mr. Durst made the statement and previously testified to. Do you understand
Yes.
the time period that I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me, when he made the statement to you, can you describe what was his demeanor?
Matter of fact and a little sad.
And what was it that makes you think he was sad when he was saying? Was there something he did, or something he conveyed that led you to that opinion or conclusion?
He seemed to be looking down, I suppose, and looking right at me.
Was he looking right at you before he made the statement?
Yes.
Right. I wanted to go back, I don't think I covered this. Did you become aware, strike that. At any point in time, did Robert Durst mention to you that he was aware of the reinvestigation? So the time period that I'm talking about is with respect to the reinvestigation into Kathy Durst's disappearance, that time period.
Not that I can recall.
At any point in time, did he convey to you that he himself was aware of the reinvestigation?
Not that I can recall.
Did you and Susan talk about the reinvestigation prior to the time that she was killed?
I don't think so, but I don't know for sure. Wait a minute. Yes, she mentioned it once to me on the phone.
I'm sorry?
I believe she mentioned it once to me on the phone.
And do you recall what, if anything, she said about it?
Something to the effect of they're reopening Bobby's case.
Anything more that you can remember about it?
No.
You talked yesterday about your feelings about testifying today. In the time period that it took you to divulge all the information that you knew, did you consider what you would have felt like had a trial occurred and you not have provided the information that you had?
Yes, I had.
And what did you end up concluding or feeling about that possibility?
I felt, sorry about the language, that I was dishonoring Susan Berman's memory and my friendship with her.
I had asked you yesterday about the difficulty of divulging the information that you had about your best friend, Mr. Durst. Is there anything that you can compare to in terms of the difficulty you had divulging what you knew?
I mean, any other thing in my life?
Any other thing that you can imagine that compares to the difficulty that you've had?
No, nothing is on that level that I can think of.
Do you recall me asking you that question previously?
I believe I do, yes.
Do you recall what you said in response?
I think approximately what I just said a moment ago.
Do you remember making a comparison to losing a child?
Yeah. Well, that was the only other horrifying thing I could think of, yes. Sorry, I didn't quite do that.
And Paul, do you remember what you said about, in contemplating how difficult it was for you to testify? Does that now refresh your memory?
Yes.
What did you say?
I said the only thing that would compare to it would be the death of a child and losing a child.
I want to go to the period of time when Mr. Durst was in custody in New Orleans, in jail, after his arrest in March of 2015. Do you understand that time?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall in July of 2015, for the first time mentioning to us on the phone that that was when the defense efforts to contact you, that you became aware of them?
I remember the conversation. I don't remember exactly when it was. I have to rely on your memory.
Does it make sense, if I were to ask you, the efforts that were made, would that have been the first time that you were aware of it? Would that have been in the last week, the last month, more than the last year? When would it have been?
Well, not in the last week or month, certainly.
If I were to tell you that you had told us on July 16, 2015, what do you mean, 16? Sorry. The date is between 16 and 16. July 16, 2015, that was the first time that you had mentioned that there had been efforts that you were aware of by the defense to contact you. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Chavin, during the conversations that you had with us, did you make it clear at different points that you were concerned about Mr. Durst and his attorneys finding out what you had said to us? The timing of that.
Can you answer that again?
So, sure. And while you were relaying the information through this series of months, beginning on April 6, 2015, did you express concern as to if and when Mr. Durst and his lawyers would be made aware of what you had said?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
And did we tell you at the time that we would not be releasing anything about your involvement in this case until we had gone to the judge well after charges were filed?
Yeah, you mentioned that several times when I asked you.
And in fact, did we call you on or about January 30th of this year, less than a month ago, and tell you, you know what, Mr. Chavin, we have now turned over your information to the defense?
Yes, you did.
And is that the same day that you came out here and were provided protection by Los Angeles Police Department Metro?
Yes.
All right, I want to go now to April 8, 2016. We're going to fast forward, about a little less than a year ago. Do you recall receiving a phone call from Mr. Durst while he was in jail?
Yes.
And to the best of your memory, was that the first time that you had spoken to him since he had been in jail in New Orleans?
Yes.
Do you recall, you had a chance to re-listen to that call within the past week with us, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me, as best you can recall, how quickly during that phone call Mr. Durst brought up the dinner that you had previously had?
Nearly immediately.
And was this the first time that you had talked to Mr. Durst in a considerable length of time?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Now, at this point, I'm going to play the 4/8/16 clip from that jail call. It's at 4/8/16 at 8:41 p.m. This is NC 210. This is going to be page 2, lines 22 through 28 to page 3, lines 1 through 14.
This is an exhibit that you...
This will be part of Exhibit 6.
Thank you.
I figure it was about a year ago, actually 2 years ago. I've been in here a year, and I figure it was about a year before that my good son Andrew Jarecki sent me to prison that we had dinner.
No, I think it was about a year ago. That bastard Jarecki, remember I told you not to do it. You remember I told you, right?
Unbelievable, how stupid I could be.
Okay, I don't want to be an I told you so person, but he's just so slimy, man. Maybe it was 2 years ago, but we had dinner, and I was really upset that apparently he had shown your footage to the authorities, like, months and months before they were even aware of it. Like he was working for them. Pardon me?
Before I was aware of it.
Right.
And I wasn't even looking for it. I wasn't even
No.
concerned about it.
Did you recognize your voice?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And to the best of your memory, is that the call that you had?
Yes, it is.
And again, your ability with dates and times, not the best.
Not the best, no.
During that same call, did you and Mr. Durst discuss speaking to each other further, do you recall?
I don't recall. I don't think we spoke to each other further.
Here, I'm gonna play again. It's a clip from the same call.
Yes, we did.
That's gonna be NC 214, 4/8/16 at 2041, page 11, lines 15 through 20.
Same people 6. Thank you.
Who did you say told you not to call me?
Mr. Sorry, they told me.
Oh. Why? I've been told me not to call you. They said you might say something bad, something wrong. I said, no, Bob and I communicate. We're not going to say anything weird.
They wanted to debrief you first.
Do you recall that now?
Well, I hear my voice, so obviously it happened. But for some reason, I wasn't as focused on that as I was at the beginning of the call.
Okay. Do you recall after you were contacted? Do you recall after you were contacted by Mr. Durst? Did you pick up the phone and contact myself or Detective Shamlian?
Could we have an instruction to the jury that
we'll
defense
talk
lawyers...
about that. We'll talk about that in chambers. We'll talk about that in chambers. Don't ask for instructions in front of the jury.
We talk about it before the jury is excused?
No, we'll talk afterwards. I'm going to excuse the jurors. Please be seated, Mr. DeGuerin. Hey, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to return tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Do not discuss the case. Sorry, where's my little script? Do not talk about any subject involved with it, any of the people or any subjects. avoid any media accounts. And we will see you tomorrow at 9:30. Mr. DeGuerin, that's not appropriate. You know better than that. Don't ask for an instruction. That's the same thing as, that's virtually like me instructing them. We're not arguing these things. If you want an instruction, that's fine, but don't do it in front of the jury. What instruction do you want, Mr. DeGuerin?
I was expecting the court to do it sua sponte because of the implication that there was anything improper about defense lawyers trying to contact a witness.
I think it's good work, actually, on your part. And
I would appreciate it if you tell the jury
I
that.
think the other component of it is the security part.
Listen, you know what, you agreed to this in advance. You knew it was coming. You do these things during the break, and instead of suddenly leaping up and making an objection like that is not appropriate. So we can talk about whether or not I should instruct them. Of course, it may be, it's relevant. The fact that you did it, I think, like I said, you're waiting to talk to a witness. Went to his home. On the one hand, it can be seen as menacing or disturbing or violating his privacy. On the other hand, it could be good work too. I mean, you want to talk to the witnesses. That's important.
Wait a minute, I didn't go to his home. That's a misunderstanding that apparently the court has.
No,
I went to his public office.
Your Honor,
and I sat there in his waiting room. I gave him my card. Kat was with me, and I'm not embarrassed about that at all. But the jury has been basically implied that was improper conduct. I would have expected the court to sua sponte say lawyers are expected to talk.
Your Honor, can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
John, let me say one thing first.
Yeah, okay.
Putting aside the court being upset that it was presented in the way it was or at the time it was.
Yes, both. Perhaps
the court can take the evening to think about what you think is the right response to that, because I understand you said we had time to bring it to your attention, but the fact is, combining the two things of security and his concern for his safety with the idea that lawyers are trying to contact him, just please reflect on it, Your Honor.
Well, I'll reflect on it, but listen, one of my rules of thumb is make the lawyers do the work. So you write an instruction, and I will consider it.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, Mr. Lewin, you wanted to weigh in on that?
You know, here's the problem, and this has been a continuing theme with the defense.
Oh, God.
They stipulated, agreed to this transcript, which they have had. We gave up something. Nick Chavin's not here. We could have brought him out here. The reason Nick Chavin is not here is because they wanted a stipulation. They're the ones who brought this up again. I proposed stipulations several years ago. Last week, they came to us and said, you know what about Nick Chavin? And we hustled through and got the stipulation done. They had the transcript, they agreed to the transcript. Now they have the nerve to literally accuse you, Your Honor, of somehow you were supposed to intercede to instruct on something they had agreed to.
Well,
every single one of these transcripts, every one, they agreed to. So, Your Honor, no instructions. We gave up something for him to be here. The time to discuss instructions was before there was a stipulation.
Mr. Lewin is not wrong about what he's saying in a pure sense, Your Honor, but things happen in trial that affect the lawyers, and good lawyers respond, even if Mr. Lewin's right that there might have been a different time to do it. So I think everybody should do what you say, take a deep breath. I will work on an instruction. I will share it with Mr. Lewin, and we'll go from there.
I think I've been pretty careful to protect the reputations of everyone involved and to avoid any suggestion of impropriety. I certainly have been most solicitous of in this regard. I mean, as far as Mr. Lewin's accusations have been made against him by the defense that I don't think were appropriate, and I instructed the jurors. Here, there's something that slipped your attention until you heard it, I guess, but it is something I'm willing to do. But I just, again, that wasn't the right way to do it. So that's fine. You submit your your proposed instruction, and I'll consider giving it. Fair enough. People don't appreciate what lawyers need to do in order to prepare their case, to advocate for their client. That's fine. Here, that might have affected the witness might not have appreciated it, and so that may affect his testimony. It may bear upon his credibility. I think that there's room for balance and an instruction to the jurors. I think it is fine to instruct them. I've instructed them after previous testimony that was admitted by stipulation. So we'll discuss it tomorrow. We'll see you at 8:30. Anything else?
No, thank you, Ron.
Department 81, sitting as Department 1. It's adjourned.